much money do you think you'll raise from tariffs on an annual basis?
That's the most interesting question. I think it'll be a staggering amount. It will be the external, I call it the External Revenue Service. That was a name that was devised by a few of us, but I think it's going to be a staggering amount.
President Trump signing a new executive order yesterday for federal agencies to study the impact of worldwide reciprocal tariffs, with plans to impose those tariffs in April. He promises the tariffs will increase jobs, create new jobs, while raising, as you just heard, a staggering amount of money. Joining me now is U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Treasury Secretary Bessent, great to have you this morning. Congratulations to you, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Maria. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Secretary, I'm wondering if some of this is theater. The president said that he was going to impose the reciprocal tariffs a week ago. Now, yesterday, instead of actually putting them into action, he said you're going to study them. Is he saying that if Europe cuts its tariffs, then the United States will cut tariffs and will not impose a reciprocal tariff on Europe?
Well, Maria, as we've learned with President Trump, you should take him at his word. This is not theater. The April 1st deadline is for a study that the Commerce Department is doing on global tariffs that apply to U.S. products, country by country. And also, we're not just looking at tariffs, but we're looking at non-tariff barriers, the local content, things like that. And we're also looking at currency manipulation. As I've repeatedly said, the U.S. has a strong dollar policy, but because we have a strong dollar policy, it doesn't mean that other countries get to have a weak currency policy. So, we're going to come up with what is the equivalent of an index, what I would call a reciprocal index, country by country, the outstanding tariffs, non-tariff, the trade barriers, and currency manipulation. And President Trump is serious about negotiating this. And look, I don't understand why there's any pushback on this, that if they want to bring all these barriers down, then we will have more frictionless global trade.
So are you expecting the president to institute reciprocal tariffs in April?
I'm expecting that we will get this report and we will see how our trading partners choose to respond. But I can tell you that if he needs to, he will implement them. And as he said in the interview yesterday, this can be a big revenue source for the U.S. government.
Yeah, and he's talked about the External Revenue Service, of course, sir. But look, you mentioned the criticism. The Wall Street Journal is out with an op-ed this morning. And here's the title: Reciprocal Tariffs Make No Sense. The author writes, Trump says the U.S. will, quote, impose the same tariffs on other countries as they impose on the U.S., no more, no less. That sounds fair. We treat them the way they treat us, but it's actually a terrible idea. It amounts to outsourcing U.S. tariff policy to other countries, that they would dictate what our tariffs would be. Your reaction?
Look, I think that is a simplified reductionist view. It's typical of the old thinking, and it's the reason the U.S. has been taken advantage of for years and years. It's the reason we have these gigantic trade deficits. It's the reason that many of our products aren't allowed to be sold abroad. All President Trump wants is for American businesses to have frictionless trade, and I will stand behind our American manufacturers to make the best products at the best price, and they can sell anywhere in the world without these barriers.
Let me move on to the amount of revenue you would expect, because the Committee for a Responsible Budget was out with some numbers in terms of what the tariffs on China would bring in, what the tariffs on the European Union would bring. Do you have an estimate in terms of what you're looking at, the kind of revenue you would expect from these tariffs?
Well, again, Maria, it's going to depend on our trading partners' responses, how quickly they do it, how much they do it over time. So, but I could tell you that these could be very, very substantial if they don't want to take their tariffs down, because we will match them percent for percent, dollar for dollar.
Let me get your take on sanctions, because Vice President J.D. Vance told the Wall Street Journal that the U.S. is considering new sanctions on Moscow and potential military action to push Vladimir Putin into a peace deal with Ukraine. He also said that the U.S. troops in Ukraine are not off the table. Zelensky told the Munich Security Conference he doesn't think the U.S. has a plan for peace in his country. He'll meet with Vance later today. So, Mr. Secretary, what are the plans in terms of sanctions, which is another one of your roles at the Treasury? Sanctions on Moscow, and then I want to get your take on the sanctions on Iran, because I know that the Biden administration blew off those sanctions, enabling Iran to raise billions by selling oil.
Yeah, so, Maria, I was in Kyiv on Wednesday, met with President Zelensky, and presented our vision and President Trump's vision for a solution for this horrible war. And President Trump has what I think is one of the most elegant plans I've ever seen for ending this war. Part of it starts with intertwining the Ukrainian economy more with the U.S. and making sure that U.S. taxpayers receive a return for the money they put in, and then helping the Ukrainian people accelerate out of this crisis after the war. And the second part of this plan, if necessary, the Russian leadership should know that if President Trump directs me, we will go to maximum sanctions on Russian energy as soon as possible.
Yeah, no, I'm going to get to that in a moment, because I love this idea of actually getting something for the money that we've been sending to Ukraine. And I know everyone appreciates the fact that you traveled all the way to Ukraine. So I'm going to get to that in a moment. Bottom line, are you expecting to put sanctions on Moscow?
Again, just like with the tariffs, it will depend on how President Putin comes to the table. If we believe that taking the sanctions regime up to a maximum threshold level will help us achieve negotiating leverage, and as you know, no one understands negotiating leverage better than President Trump. So that will be his decision, and Treasury will implement it.
What about, so, I mean, the president said he was signing an executive order to return maximum pressure to Iran. Are you saying that you're not there yet?
Well, I'm sorry, I was talking about Russia. So with Iran, we are committed to bringing the Iranians to going back to the 100,000 barrels a day of oil exports. When President Trump left office, that was they were at 100,000 barrels a day. Now they're 1.6 million barrels a day, and that's how the Iranian regime is funding these terrorist activities around the world. The Chinese, perhaps the Indians, are buying the sanctioned Iranian oil, and that is unacceptable. Right. So we think we can apply a maximum economic pressure to the Iranian regime. And I will tell you, I've seen the internal numbers, and their economy is quite fragile right now. They have massive inflation. They have a gigantic budget deficit, and that is with the 1.6 million barrels a day of oil being sold. So if we get them back to the Trump 1.0 levels, I believe that they will be in severe economic distress.
Yeah, and I guess that's the point. If they don't stop supporting these terrorist proxies. Let me go back to your meeting with Zelensky, sir. Mr. Secretary, you met with the head of Ukraine earlier this week. You traveled there to present an economic partnership agreement. This deal would trade access to Ukrainian natural resources, including those critical rare earth minerals, for continued U.S. military support. Tell us about this. What is most attractive to the United States that Ukraine has, and is this basically the way that the U.S. will continue to support Ukraine?
Exactly, Maria, that we want the American people to understand that currently we are aligned with Ukrainians on values, we are aligned with them on security, and we want to become more aligned with them on economics. And I think that it is win-win, as the American people have a stake in the recovery of the Ukrainian economy post this conflict, and we will get to the other side of this conflict. Then the U.S. will share in the benefits, and by having U.S. partnership capital and ingenuity, I think the Ukrainian economy, that the U.S. involvement will act as an accelerant. Just next door to Ukraine is one of the great success stories of the past 30 years is Poland. Poland has had the second highest economic growth in the world since the 1990s after China. So why couldn't Ukraine do that? And why shouldn't the American people share in that through rare earths, through their energy, and through their state-owned enterprises? And we bring best practices in terms of privatization, in terms of modernization.
Did Zelensky agree with that, Secretary? Did you get a deal done?
President Zelensky is going to be discussing this today with Vice President Vance at the Munich Security Conference, and I am confident we will get a deal done.
And one of the rare earth minerals is titanium, which we need, by the way, for data centers and to power up our own plans for artificial intelligence. Is that one of the attractive minerals that you referred to?
There's a whole array of strategic minerals that we have. And the other thing we're going to have to do, a lot of the processing, you can have the minerals, a lot of the processing still takes place in China. So we're also going to be working on secure processing either here in the U.S. or in Europe.
And Secretary, I want to get your take on cutting out waste because, of course, Doge agency is going to agency after agency trying to cut out wasteful spending. Are there also opportunities to do this at the Treasury?
Maria, I will tell you that this caricature that's being painted, created of Doge is by the people who don't want accountability. And these are serious people, and they're going from agency to agency, doing an audit, looking for best practices. And what I've seen is that at the agencies above us is where most of the problems are. And sure, at Treasury, we could always do a better job too, but that this waste, fraud, and abuse that's gone on, there's a lot of complaining now. I didn't see anyone complaining when the budget deficit was blown out. This money went flying out the door, just before the election, right after the election, and there's going to have to be some accountability.
And I want to get your take on what that means, practically speaking, in terms of agencies being shut down. Elon Musk spoke about it this week. Here he is from Dubai. Watch this.
I think we do need to delete entire agencies as opposed to leave part of them behind. If you don't remove the roots of the weed, then it's easy for the weed to grow back.
Are you expecting entire agencies to go away with regard to financial services? I'm talking about, whether or not the IRS merges into another agency, the CFTC merges into the Securities and Exchange Commission. What are the plans?
Look, we're examining everything, but again, kind of this hysteria that things are going to be merged, that things are going to be liquidated, is we are doing a thorough accounting. Like I like to say, at Treasury, we move deliberately and we fix things, and we are going to fix this. And if there's overlap, and as far as the IRS, with the IRS, I have 3 goals. It's collections, privacy, and customer service. And I don't think there's anyone in the country who thinks that the IRS has achieved its potential in either of those 3.
And one of the things that President Trump said was wasting a lot of money is producing the penny. Does it really cost 2 cents to make 1 penny?
It actually costs a bit more than that. So, we're going to stop producing the penny. And there are examples of this all over government where the machine just runs on until someone says why. And it's a cost cutter like President Trump with this Doge. And remember, Doge is the Department of Government Efficiency.
Right.
So we want government to run better for the American taxpayer. And there are plenty of wonderful civil servants who come in every day and want to make things run better. And we want to partner with them and give them the means to do that.
Secretary, before you go, I just have one last question for you. The Committee for Responsible Budget says that President Trump's tariffs include a 10% additional tariff on all imports from China. And they say that tariff will raise $20 billion in revenue through the rest of this calendar year and $200 billion through fiscal year 2035. Do you agree with those numbers?
Yeah, that's just for the China tariff.
Right.
So that could be approximately right. I haven't seen the exact numbers. We're still working on those. So,
Secretary, thank you so much.
Again, these are big numbers, Maria. So thanks.
Absolutely. And the president said it was staggering. We so appreciate your time, Secretary. We'll be watching your work, of course. Secretary Scott Bessent joining us. Thank you, sir.